there's a whole a whole wide range of uses of tin, which is why some people call it the spice element, because you need a little bit in everything. We're coming out of a period of sort of flattish demand growth into a new era, if you will, where demand growth looks like it's going to be somewhere around 3-4%, but supply really isn't keeping up. So the price, as you might expect, is really rushing higher to encourage that new supply.
James Willoughby joins me now. He's the market analyst for the International Tin Association. James, welcome.
Thank you very much.
James, quick overview. What is the International Tin Association's mandate?
Yeah, so we are a membership organization that is really designed to promote tin in general. We have a membership made up of the world's largest tin producers, but we're here to help promote tin use, investment in tin, sustainability, things like that.
Most people hear about tin, they automatically default to the tin can. And while some cans still contain tin, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of the use of tin is elsewhere and is particularly relevant in the electrification of the world as it pertains to circuit boards. So how is tin used and where is it most in demand?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think most people do still think of tin as, in your can of baked beans and that sort of thing. But actually that tin plate use is now the third largest use of tin globally. Tin's major use is in solder, which you're right, is what is sort of the glue that holds together all of the world's electronics. So that's tin's major use. That's about half of all tin use. And, there's a variety of other end use sectors, such as chemicals, which go into sort of your plastics and your pipes on your house, some in glass as well. Tin plate, as I mentioned, is used in lead acid batteries for your car. There's a whole wide range of uses of tin, which is why some people call it the spice element, because you need a little bit in everything.
Then what do the supply-demand metrics look like that have justified tripling of the commodity price of tin in the last 10 years?
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing run for the tin price, not only in the last 10 years, but particularly in sort of the last year or two. Really, the tin market, about 10 years ago was relatively stable. You were looking at a market with supply and demand of about 360,000 tons, relatively small compared to your coppers, your nickels, your aluminiums. But that's really growing at the moment quite strongly. We're coming out of a period of sort of flattish demand growth into a new era, if you will, where demand growth looks like it's going to be somewhere around 3-4%, but supply really isn't keeping up. So the price, as you might expect, is really rushing higher to encourage that new supply.
CAGR, compound annual growth rate, is 3 to 4% for tin demand? Going
forward, we believe it's going to accelerate to that. Over the last maybe 50 years or so, it's been averaging about 1.82%. So you're looking at maybe doubling the annual growth rate.
Does the supply side of tin have the same sort of incline?
Definitely not. We are looking at quite a significant undersupply unless we really get new investment into tin supply.
It sounds like there's a shortage of tin on the horizon. How possible is it that electronics manufacturers could replace tin in the process of gluing together circuit boards?
It's definitely a question we get asked a lot, especially, after the price has risen so much. I think it's very difficult to replace tin in circuit boards. At sort of a very basic level, it's going to take companies, quite a long time to redesign all of your electronics. You would have to redesign all of your computers, phones, cars, everything would need to be, changed to use some new connection method. But in sort of very basic terms, there doesn't seem to be a metal that quite has the same properties as tin for those connections. People have tried things like silver, copper, different conductive adhesives, things like this, but they're all only good for very niche connections under very certain conditions, whereas tin can really do it all. And in terms of a price perspective, you're looking at maybe 1 gram of tin in your iPhone. So for someone that's, making all of these electronics devices, the change in the price really doesn't matter too much to them. You're looking at very minimal unit increases. So there's not too much reason for them to redesign everything.
Who is the leading provider of finished tin in the form of solder to the electronics industry?
In terms of a country, China produces most of the world's solder. In general tin use terms, China is about half of the market, and half of its consumption is in solder. And that's where a lot of the electronics manufacturing in the world is. So yeah, a lot of it is based over there.
Are you seeing a lot more investment coming into the tin mining side of things at this point?
We're definitely starting to see interest and investment picking up. Over the last decade, perhaps 2 decades, we've only seen a handful of tin mines come online, bringing with them maybe 15,000 tons of new supply. And really that hasn't kept up with declines in other, historical mines that have been slowing over the same period. But that is now picking up. We are seeing much more investment going into tin mines. The exploration sector is really accelerating. And we're hopeful that that trend will continue so that we can really close that supply gap that we're seeing over the next 5-10 years.
Is the processing of tin into solder a highly impactful on global emissions?
In terms of the processing of tin, it's a relatively simple process. For a lot of tin mines, all you really have to do is crush the rock, simply filter it using gravity, and out comes your cassiterite, which is the tin containing mineral. And then it's a very simple smelting process to get that into the form of metal, which is basically just extruded into solder wire, slightly more complex to get your solder paste, which goes into your sort of high-end electronics. But relatively, the sort of processing chain is quite simple compared to other base metals.
So let's say I have a tin mine in Brazil. Who do I sell my tin to?
You'd sell it to one of the local Brazilian tin smelters, probably. If the market was particularly oversupplied in Brazil, you might ship it into Southeast Asia. But the tin smelting market in Brazil is quite large.
Are the participants in that market members of the International Tin Association?
We do have 2 Brazilian members. We have Toboca, which is a subsidiary of the Peruvian producer Minsa. And we also have White Solder, who recently joined the association.
In terms of other uses for tin, do they have demand increasing over the near term, or is it stable, or what's that look like?
So for most of the other tin uses, we see them as relatively stable markets. But of course, there are other potential uses of tin that could be coming in over the next decade or so that could be really exciting. So one that we're watching very carefully at the moment is in solar power. So within your larger solar panel, you have cells which are all connected with a ribbon, which is essentially a flattened copper wire coated in tin. And that uses quite a lot of tin. So for every gigawatt of solar power that you're adding to your grid, you need about 75 tons of tin. So that's a very exciting new use for the tin market. And there are more uses in R&D as well. There are potential uses for tin in lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles, for example, which could be very beneficial to the tin market as well. This goes sort of above and beyond that 3-4% growth rate that I mentioned already. This sort of lithium-ion battery story is really an addition to that.
Sure. So what is the current price of tin in the commodities market in the forward month, for example?
Yeah, so the sort of main contract 3-month price is about $43,500 a ton right now. That is up quite a lot in the last year and a half. Before really all of the sort of COVID pandemic took off, tin averaged around $20,000 a ton. So you're looking at maybe 2 times the price at the moment in the current market.
Sure. And do you have a projection on where you see it in 24 months, 36 months?
Yeah, I mean, we think that for all of the reasons that we've already talked about, we think the tin price will remain relatively strong. In the short term, there are some moderate signs of weakness just because, global markets, global construction, automotive, things like this, they are constrained by shortages of other parts, shipping issues, things like this. So some short-term weakness, but longer term, the demand outlook coupled with the sort of lack of new supply really means that we do think prices will hold at quite a high level.
And what about the origins of tin? I know that 5% of the world's tin comes from the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example. And are there issues around the concept of conflict tin?
Yeah, so quite a lot of tin does come from the DRC and Central Africa as well. The majority of that now comes from Alphamin's Pissier mine. They have traceability built into their mine, so they track all of their production from initial blasting all the way through to the smelter and beyond. And indeed, with a lot of the other mines in Africa, they also have traceability schemes as well. The major one is ITSCI, which was developed by the International Tin Association to deal with these conflict minerals issues. This is a bagging and tagging exercise. So at the mine, they will bag up all of their tin concentrate. They'll weigh it, tag it, and at every step of the supply chain, it will be weighed and checked to make sure there's been no tampering with it, and to make sure that none of the funds go towards funding conflict. So really, it's quite a good situation now. With ITSCI, with other traceability schemes in place in Africa, we really feel like the tin industry is on top of the sort of conflict minerals situation.
Okay, great. James, we're going to leave it there for now. That's an excellent overview of the tin market. We will come back to you in due course and hope to see that price keep rising. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much.